Negotiating is one of the hardest things to teach. Not because it's hard to do, but because every negotiation is completely different. Because no buyer is the same and no seller is ever the same. They all have different reasons for wanting what they want. They have different fears, different concerns, different emotions, different time of year, Mercury's in retrograde, whatever could come into play. Every negotiation is totally different. But every negotiation, when you really think about it, is relatively simple. If you have a house that's asking $1 million and a buyer offers $1 million, not a whole lot to negotiate right there, right? So that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is you have a seller who's got a price at X, and you have a buyer who has a price at Y, and you have to bridge the gap. That's every negotiation. And how do you bridge that gap? You have the 3 P's. You have price, pressure, and persistence. And the 4th P is psychology, but it doesn't sound as cool because the P is silent. Little p. So price, pressure, and persistence. So you need to write down, before you go into any negotiation, those 3 words. Because they're going to help you and they're going to center you during any negotiation, whether the negotiation is simple and easy and good and happy, or whether the negotiation is really tough and hard and challenges every single core value you've ever had in your whole life. So price, what do I mean by that? I don't mean the listing price or the offer price, because you already have those. I mean 2 things. First is legacy price. What did the seller pay for the house? Did they pay a little bit and the market's improved a lot, so no matter what number it gets done at, they're making money? Or did they pay too much and even their listing price is under what they paid and they're already losing money? Figure out what that legacy price is before you go into any negotiation, because it's really going to dictate how all of your conversations go. The second number, that's part of price, is what number do you think the deal is going to get done at? Now, a lot of agents talk about what things are worth. Worth is like the worst word in the world. That's a lot of W's right there. I hate that word, because how do you know what something's worth? It's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it, right? So sitting there and saying, yeah, but based on the comps and based on this and based on that, it's really worth this. No. In a negotiation, something is only worth the number that the buyer will come to and the number that the seller is going to finally agree on. Now, that doesn't mean throw comps out of the window. No, when you're sitting with the seller, you're coming to a listing price, or you're trying to negotiate, you want to use those comps. But at the end of the day, they don't mean anything. What really matters is the number you're trying to get that client to. So let's say you have a big gap, okay? You have a $100,000 gap that you're trying to close. But the market says that it's really worth the listing price, but you know the buyer's never going to get there. That second number that I want you to write down on that piece of paper before you go into any negotiation is the number you are going to try to get this deal to close at. Because if it doesn't get there and you don't close, then there is no deal and you make no money, right? So price, legacy price, and what price you are actually going to try to get this deal done at. And that second number is going to change with every buyer. On that same listing where you're $100,000 away with buyer A, buyer B could walk in tomorrow and be $50,000 away, or $20,000 away, or $200,000 away. So that second number is always going to change, and every deal is going to be different, which is important to remember. Because in my mind, every deal, 99% of every deal is a deal. Just the difference between it getting done and not getting done is you and I knowing how to negotiate and everybody else not knowing how to negotiate. Because I deal with real estate agents all the time who don't know this process, who don't know how to talk to their clients, and the deal might as well just be dead when they start. Because they don't know how to talk. They don't know how to communicate. They don't know the psychology, which is the 4th little p, remember? And they don't know what to do. So I end up having to do all the work for them. So my hope, honestly, is that maybe some of the real estate agents I work with all the time are watching this as well, and they're going to help me do more deals, hopefully. Second P, pressure. Pressure is fear. And I'm not talking about, oh my God, you better sell or you're going to die. That could work. What I'm talking about is you need to find the pressures that are both on the seller and on the buyer that are going to get them to come to that number that you have already determined is the right number to get this deal closed at based on what you know about the seller and what they paid and how motivated they are, and what you know about the buyer and how motivated they are and how much they can afford. So for the seller, the fear is not selling. That's the biggest fear for any real seller. And unfortunately, on the marketplace, there's always a lot of sellers who aren't really worried about selling because they don't need to sell. They just want to see if they can get their number. So that fear, that pressure isn't going to work. On them, what you use is the pressure of a deteriorating market. So is the market going to get worse? Are interest rates going to go up? Do we have an election year coming up? In which case everything's going to come at full stop. Because if someone is actively on the market looking to sell, they might not need to sell today, but they probably want to sell sometime in the near future. Maybe they don't want to sell this year, but if they don't sell this year, might they have to wait 5 years for the market to get better, for the next presidential election to happen, for interest rates to come back? You're not a magician. You can't predict the future. But all of these things are possibilities, right? So you're trying to help through slow, delicate pressure, the seller understand what the alternatives are if they don't do the deal at the number you're trying to get them to. Now, that works if you're able to talk to the seller directly. And it also works if you're able to educate the seller's broker if you happen to be on the buy side. Now, with the buyer, the pressure you're giving them is kind of the same. It's not buying. If you don't buy this, maybe there's nothing else for you to buy. Maybe they're going to lose out on an amazing opportunity that's an incredible deal. Maybe if they don't buy now, interest rates are on their way up. The same house at the same price in 6 months, it's just going to cost them a lot more per month than it would right now if they just pulled the trigger. And then you can go back to push, pull, and persist, the other 3 Ps that we dealt with in the earlier video. Because buyers need to have some pressure as well to help get them to understand that their price probably isn't the best price, and they're probably going to have to come up if that's what they want. And remember that with pressure, the one in the relationship who cares the least has all the power. So if the seller really needs to sell and the buyer doesn't really need to buy, the buyer holds all the power. If the buyer really needs to move because they want to get a deal and they've got cash right now and interest rates are rising or whatever the reasons are, and the seller just wants to get their price, then the seller has all the power. And you need to understand where you are in that power spectrum when applying the right types of pressure. And then the 3rd P is persistence. And I love that word, and I've said it multiple times throughout this entire course. Actually, my favorite word is initiative. Second favorite is persistence, because every deal is a deal. But so many people are so lazy when it comes to bridging the gap because they don't know how to have these conversations, or they don't like to have these conversations, or they get uncomfortable, or they just are plain inexperienced, that they let time kill deals. And I'm sure you've heard that before. Because a deal that could get done today or in the next couple weeks, if you're persistent and continue to apply pressure to get to the right price point, is a deal that every other agent is going to let die. Because it's too hard. It's too hard to bridge that gap. No, you're just too far apart. My seller will never do it. No, if you don't come down further than that, my buyer's not coming up. Why do real estate agents make these assumptions all the time? If they have real buyers or real sellers, there's a bridge that will take them across that gap and they will get more deals done. And now you can get more deals done too. Now, there's 1,000 different ways you can negotiate, and we don't have enough time to go through every single little intricacy of every negotiation. But if you remember those 3 Ps, if you remember price, if you remember pressure, if you remember persistence, and if you remember that there's a little psychology built into all of this as well, you will be more successful on more negotiations and you will sell more. Now, I want to do a real negotiation for you. I actually have a listing in Brooklyn. It's at a building called 550 Vanderbilt. It's a 2-bedroom that I have listed for $1.5 million. And I just got an offer on it for 1.1, which is pretty low. That's $400,000. And I'm going to try to bridge that gap. And watch me. Now, everything that I just went through, I might not use. I might not need to bring up because every negotiation is different. But I'm going to try my best. And let's see if we can get this deal done now that we know how to negotiate.